In this episode, we're going to concentrate on what we film. We will learn how we arrange the subject matter, in which case, right now, me, within the frame. All the various shots we use and the language we have developed to describe them. How lenses can affect the image and how light and contrast play a role. So what makes a great shot? What makes your work stand out over others? The subject matter is incredibly important, but to make a pleasing image, we have to look at how we construct that image in the frame. We've been creating artwork and telling stories visually since the dawn of man. Over that time, artists have perfected many techniques, and we still employ these techniques today. Framing or composition is as relevant in film as it is in paintings, illustration, or graphic design. Over the years, we have learned there are many ways we can arrange objects in the frame using shapes and alignments that is pleasing to us. We can also use composition and framing to guide the eye to what we want it to see or not see, help telling your story. There are many rules in filming, and when it comes to composition, the golden rule, the main rule, is the rule of thirds, and it's important to understand this so you know when and how you can break it. So with the rule of thirds, if you divide the frame into 3 segments, horizontally and vertically, by placing objects of interest in the intersecting points, we create an image that is pleasing to the eye. There are many books on the rule of thirds and how it applies to nature in much more detail, but just following this one simple rule can dramatically improve your shots. In a wide shot, we can create balance in the frame with how our subject matter relates to their surroundings. And when we're in a medium, we can place that person on the lines to make a pleasing frame. When we're in the close-up, by placing the eyes on the intersecting points helps draw our attention to them. The eyes, as they say, are the windows to the soul, and they automatically draw our attention to them. By placing them on the rule of thirds, we are helping to drive the viewer's attention that way. We can even sacrifice many other things by keeping the eyes on these intersecting points. We can chop off the top of somebody's head in the frame as long as the eyes are in focus. In fact, we can get away with quite a lot as long as the eyes are in focus on the intersecting points. Another interesting form of composition is using the central frame. By placing the subject matter solely in the center of the frame, we draw attention to it. Central framing is also really good to use in fast-paced editing and shots, as the eye doesn't have to travel around much to see what's important in that frame. Central framing also allows us to play with one of my personal favorite types of shots, a one-point perspective central framing, playing with leading lines and symmetry as used by Stanley Kubrick and Wes Anderson. It draws us into the frame and creates a faux three-dimensional feel. I've been using these more and more in my work. So what do I mean by leading lines? Well, leading lines are another concept of composition. It literally means using the lines in the frame to direct the viewer's eyes to where you want them to look. In this shot, note how the lines draw you across the screen to the main point of interest. Using depth of field with some of these previous rules, we can add to that three-dimensional space. We can also denote importance or power of certain subject matter in the frame. We can also use a shallow depth of field to denote the importance of the subject matter or character and their inner story. Filling the frame also denotes power. An extreme close-up like this lets you know how important the person is, while shrinking the subject matter in a wide, making them appear small, can also show how they're feeling or their worth to the scene. Contrast and light can also play a part. We are naturally pulled towards looking at brighter objects in the frame. A darkened frame with an eye light or spotted area will pull you right in. We can also create a frame within a frame. A doorway or window can frame the subject matter. Another compositional subject I'd like to talk about is lead space. If a character in the shot is looking to the left, then they should be placed on the right. This means they're looking into the empty space, making a more natural shot. Again, by understanding these rules means we can break them for effect. So we know the different rules of how to organise the subject matter in the frame. Now we're going to look at the different types of shots we regularly use and how they can help us with our storytelling. Eventually, composition will start becoming truly second nature to you. Whenever I'm out and about and looking at things, I actually see things as frames. It's become quite bad at times. I go to a restaurant, I sit down and I choose a table, based upon, that's a nice background and frame for taking photos of the person I'm with. Watch TVs, watch movies, look at stuff online, read, experiment, find the style that you like. So this is a full frame sensor and I have a 10mm on. This is truly an extreme wide angle. And this is a wide angle, an 18mm on a full frame. It's not as crazy as the last one, and this is much more practical. This is used to really establish a shot. It gives a sense of space and the location that you're in. And this is what's called a full shot. It's called that because we can see full body, top to toe, with a little bit of space, top and bottom. This is a medium long. As you can see, it is the knees and the head in frame. We don't go wider than this where we cut off the feet because that is really unnatural. This is the widest of our official medium shots. This is the cowboy shot. This is a frame so we can see, just by the crotch, we can see our guns. Not those, guns for cowboys, hence the name. It's not really something that I do much of. I haven't filmed many westerns, especially down here in Richmond Lock. But this is the cowboy. And this is our medium shot. This is a 50mm on a full frame sensor. This is what we see with our eyes, our field of view. 50mm, very standard and beautiful shot. And this is our medium close-up, otherwise known as an MCU. And this is our nice shot we use very frequently for interviews and for dialogue scenes of our main characters. And this is our close-up. This is the tightest shots we do before we start cutting off the top of the head. This close-up is called the choker because it is just above Sarah's choker. Cutting top of the head off and just below the chin. And this is our extreme close-up. This is as close as we get whilst keeping the mouth and the eyes in frame. This is used for getting that heightened connection with your character. It also is the one that's going to show the most flaws. Not that you have any flaws, Sarah. And this is our macro. This is about as extreme close-up as you're going to do. It's so close you can see me reflecting in Sarah's eye, and our depth of field is incredibly narrow. In episode 1, I talked about that standard field of view, what we essentially see with our eyes, which is 50mm on a full frame, 35mm on a crop, super 35mm sensor. And whilst we can shoot so much with just a single lens, we want to get a close-up, we walk closer to the subject, and if we want to go wider, we walk back. Using different lenses has a really profound impact on both the subject and the background. In this shot of Julian, both he and the lock are very prominent in the frame. You look at it all and you take it all in. 18mm, a nice wide angle. And as we go on to a longer lens, we are narrowing our field of view. So we're seeing less of the lock. Julian is still the same in the frame, background is knocked out. He is becoming more important. And it's the same as we go tighter. 50mm, a narrower field of view. The background is continuing to get knocked out of focus and we're seeing a lot less of that. And as we go on to a longer lens, we're starting to see what's behind the lock. We are pulling that background closer to Julian. We're starting to see the bridge. And as we go on to a longer lens, we can now see the traffic on the bridge. Julian is still the same size in the frame. He is still important, but the whole frame has completely changed from the beginning one, which had the lock and him. And at 300mm, you can really pull that background close to Julian. It's a completely different shot. It tricks you into thinking they are much closer together. Here's a great example of that down on Brighton Beach. This is at 400mm, and it looks like these kids are in imminent danger of being hit by this wave. But in reality, they're actually completely fine and not that close to it. It really is a dramatic effect, using a long lens to pull the background closer to a subject, something you can only do by using a longer focal length. You cannot do this with a standard field of view lens. This is why lenses and lens choices are so important. Your choice of lens will also affect how a person's face will appear. So we're filming Julian on various lenses, from a long telephoto to a super wide, and you'll see the changes in his face as we go wider and wider on our field of view. On the telephoto lenses, they do look very similar. He doesn't change that much, but his face is slightly broader and somewhat flatter. As I just explained in the previous section, you are seeing that change in the background as well. So there is a double effect on that, both to the subject matter and to the background. It's when we get into the focal length range of around 50 to 90 millimeters, which is the portrait range. This is the most natural and representative of what Julian looks like in real life. Around 85 millimeters is pretty much him as I know him. 50 millimeters is also very similar. When we start going wider, we start seeing an unnatural distortion of the face. It's not what he actually looks like, but the lens is making things look different. His face is looking somewhat wider, his nose bigger. It's not as flattering. So we get to the point where we go so insanely wide, he looks just completely bizarre. Sorry, Julian.